All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring the actual nuts and bolts ecosystem of justice to see the real gears that make due process run. Now, assuming you already have a working knowledge of state and jural assemblies, our goal here is to really break down the exact architecture of the public court system, and specifically, the officers who make the whole thing function. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover why court officers exist, administration and record keeping, courtroom operations, jury support, functional relationships, and then wrap it all up with a quick summary. Okay, part one, why court officers exist, the engine of due process. To kick things off, we really need to understand the fundamental difference in how these specific court systems are structured compared to what you're probably used to seeing. Notice the stark contrast here. On one side, you have administrative courts that gain their authority under Title V, basically acting as watchdogs over public offices. But on the other side, you have public common law courts, where the power dynamic is completely flipped on its head. In this setup, the jury is the absolute authority, acting on behalf of the jural assembly. So in a public court framework, the jury is king, but they obviously can't function without a vital engine of specialized officers backing them up. What's really fascinating is that many of these roles actually derive from ancient ecclesiastical courts. Clerks, for example, were originally clerics performing pastoral functions, and bondsmen were quite literally bondsmen of Christ. Today, their entire singular purpose is to secure a fair process so the jury can do its job. Moving right along to part two, administration and record keeping, which is really the outer layer of the court. Let's see how this department builds the foundation for every single case. Every case, without exception, begins right here at the desk of the court clerk. And in this system, the clerk isn't just pushing paper around. They are the true venue gatekeeper. They have to correctly recognize the nature of the people involved and the specific action being pursued to make sure it actually belongs in a public court to begin with. Because of that, a great clerk has to be hyper-organized, deeply understand due process, and, honestly, know how to count money. They have to instantly recognize whether a case belongs in a public jurisdiction dealing with actual people or an administrative one dealing with corporate concepts. They set the venue, assign cases to justices, and meticulously track every single piece of evidence that comes through the door. Once the clerk does their thing with the initial paperwork, the permanent layer of the court takes over through the record keepers. If the clerk is the gatekeeper, well, the record keeper is the historian. Just look at how the court protects historical continuity here. Record keepers securely log and archive all digital, audio, and paper records. And by maintaining one copy at the local county level and sending a duplicate right up to the state record keepers, they've created a decentralized system that ensures the evidence of justice can never just conveniently disappear or be erased. All right, part three, courtroom operations, the active layer. With the administration all set, the actual proceedings demand strict, completely neutral facilitation and security. If we follow a theoretical case, you can clearly see this highly secure procedural flow. First, the marshal at arms locks down the physical building. Then, the clerk ensures all the paperwork is perfectly in order. The justice steps in to facilitate the facts. The court recorder captures the audio of the proceedings. And finally, the bondsman, acting essentially as the court's bailiff, ensures the specific room or even the Zoom call is totally locked down. This brings us to a massive game-changing distinction, the justice. In this system, the justice is not a ruler. They are a referee. Unlike an administrative judge who often dictates the final outcome, a justice of the peace simply assists the jury. They answer questions about rules of evidence, they might read the final pronouncement, but they absolutely do not rule on the facts or the law. You know, finding a competent justice actually requires unlearning a lot of statutory norms. Get this, a justice here doesn't even need a bar association membership or a law degree. No way. What they do need is a humble heart, firm common sense, a sincere respect for people, and a really deep familiarity with American common law and the Ten Commandments. Which leads us perfectly into part four, jury support, or protecting the sovereign, because the jury makes literally all the decisions here, isolating them from outside interference is absolutely paramount. To really grasp why jury support is so vital, we have to look at the immense authority vested in these individuals. Under this common law framework, everyone is presumed innocent, there is no such thing as a victimless crime, and the regular people sitting in those chairs wield a true final power of the court. And that leads us to the ultimate safeguard against injustice, jury nullification. If an American jury looks at an act of legislation and finds it overreaching or completely unjust, they have the unequivocal right to just throw it out. They rule on both the facts and the law. But because they hold this incredible, heavy power, they require a dedicated protector. That protector is the bondsman, functioning basically as a bailiff or a brother's keeper. They accompany the jury to make sure their deliberations are completely undisturbed. They act as the jury's absolute only point of contact, handling the logistics, making sure screen shares work, ensuring evidence is accessible, before finally sealing the documents to hand back to the clerk.
Part 5. Functional relationships. Let's take a step back now and look at how all these officers interface with the broader state ecosystem. Court officers have to flawlessly manage the flow of information between grand juries, who listen to allegations and act as the gatekeepers of prosecution, and the trial juries, who deliver the actual final verdicts. Without a presentment or indictment from a grand jury, nobody can even be summoned to a common law court. So the administration handles all these complex moving parts so the juries can focus purely on the facts at hand. And every role relies heavily on allied functions, whether it's a marshal physically securing the perimeter or an elected coroner providing competent medical records to the clerk. They're all connected. A coroner, for instance, has to stay calm under intense emergency situations and communicate flawlessly to record a person's health or death status. That becomes vital evidence for the record keepers, the justices, and ultimately, the jury. Finally, Part 6. Summary. Let's wrap up this ecosystem of justice. Now that we've mapped out this entire operational chart, what's the primary takeaway from this explainer? Well, it's that the entire system is purposefully designed to decentralize administrative power. This allows the actual people to maintain their sovereignty without getting bogged down in procedural chaos. The officers handle all the complexities: scheduling, venue, evidence tracking, security, basically creating a pristine, neutral vacuum where the jury can safely step in and exercise its authority over the facts and the law. It's a system built entirely on mutual support and strict limits on power. Court officers provide the administrative structure necessary for courts, juries, records, and due process to function effectively. But here's the ultimate question we have to leave you with today. If this system is perfectly designed to hand all the true power over to the jury, are you ready to wield that power when called to serve?